This is going to sound funny, but it's because you asked. I was approached early on in my tenure as city controller and asked if I would be willing to contribute my papers, and I hadn't really contemplated what to do with them or that there would even be an interest, but I was happy to join my papers with those that were already in the collection. And I believe in addition, you have items from my early political career as well. I hope they actually have a view of the richness and the depth of the history of accomplishment of strong women that we've had here in Texas and in the greater Houston area. I hope that they are perhaps inspired by some of the women they come to meet through the archive. And I hope they also realize that while some of us have accomplished things that cause others to take note, that there's nothing that unusual about us, that we are perhaps more committed to a goal, or perhaps a little more persistent. I don't know, but that we're not that unusual, and I hope that particularly young women might find a reason to pursue their goals a little harder. It's in my own family. My mother worked outside the home, and both of my grandmothers worked outside the home, which was very unusual. My maternal grandmother, who was born in 1899, started teaching school at the age of 16. She taught the younger kids in a one-room schoolhouse and ended up putting herself and a number of her younger siblings through college. My paternal grandmother, who was a little bit younger, worked as a secretary for many years. And so to have women who helped raise me, who in the 20s and 30s were women in the workforce was very unusual. So the expectation for me was that I would grow up, I would go to college, and in fact, since my grandmother was also a college graduate, grow up, go to college, and support myself. I was also expected to be an active community volunteer, and on both sides of my family, we were expected to be engaged in community. And those two influences, that I would get educated and have a career, and that I would have to give back to community, are why I'm sitting here today. I was a college student in the late 1970s, and at that time I was perhaps more involved in the very early gay movement. But I was a participant in the women's conference that was held in Houston, I believe in '77. While I was a student at Rice, I was a student volunteer, actually a student volunteer for the League of Women Voters, of all things. I always considered myself a feminist. I was a member of NOW. I was a member of the Women's Political Caucus, and even though my primary activities were directed toward advances in the GLBT community, I was always also involved in women's organizations. Not as such as mayor, although I work with groups all across the community. If you ask my staff, they'll tell you that I am an absolute sucker for groups of girls or women. I do everything in my power to address Girl Scouts, organizations promoting education and leadership in girls and young women. Make it a point again to try to speak to women's organizations if it is all possible. I recognize that I'm the mayor of all of Houston, but there are very few, have been through our history, very few women mayors of major American cities. And it's still something that's a little bit unusual. And I want girls and women to know that it's possible and they should be engaged. And I want the opportunity to interact and to encourage them. Well, I also, part of my message is that you really don't have to be perfect in order to get there. One of the things that I make a point of talking about is that I'm still an extreme introvert. I was always very, very shy, socially awkward, that if you want something badly enough, you can go through what it takes to acquire the skills to get there. I had to teach myself how to do public speaking. I had to teach myself how to campaign. But today I have a job that I absolutely love and that I happen to believe that I'm very good at. And so it's also a message that that life is unexpected. I didn't start out at a young age thinking that I was going to be in politics. I spent 20 years working in the oil and gas industry before I won a council seat, and of course I've now worked my way up. But that life paths can be unpredictable too. There have always been strong women involved in shaping the world. They haven't always received the attention that they should have in terms of the formal record, and through archives and like this, we can rectify that. But it's also important to know that there have always been strong women who are shaping and influencing the world that will always be completely under the radar. And that as women, we need to support each other in all of our endeavors.